The Hollow Room. Ethan Ward moved his family into the house on Alder Lane in late autumn, when the trees were nearly bare and the light fell thin across the fields. The realtor had called it a fixer, a kind word for a house that had sat empty since a fire 15 years earlier. It was large, old, and cheap, and that was enough. He and Mara had agreed they needed quiet, somewhere the children could have space and the city could fade behind them. The first weeks passed with a dull rhythm of unpacking. Lucas and Emily explored the halls while their parents painted and patched. The rooms were lined with heavy wood, faded wallpaper, and a smell that clung even after scrubbing, a trace of smoke mixed with the sweetness of rot. When Ethan tore out sections of carpet, black dust lifted from beneath, rising in thin clouds that shimmered and settled again. The days were uneventful. Nights were not. The house stayed too cold for the season. The heating system worked, but warmth never seemed to reach beyond the hallway. The living room remained the coldest, the air there still and sharp, coming from one corner where the plaster had been repaired more recently than the rest. Ethan thought the fire must have started there. The corner was faintly discolored, the pattern of smoke stains spreading outward like veins beneath paint. Mara said little about it. She kept to the upstairs rooms with the children, reading, folding laundry, trying to make the place feel ordinary. Ethan worked late downstairs, restoring cabinets and sanding floors, listening to the ticking of old pipes and the shuffle of mice in the walls. Sometimes he thought he heard something softer beneath the noises, a faint, rhythmic scrape, but when he paused his tools, the sound stopped too. By the third week, the air inside the house felt heavier. Dust returned no matter how much they cleaned. The basement light began to fail, its bulb flickering unevenly though new. One night, Ethan noticed the shadows in the living room corner were darker than they should be, even when he turned every light on. The air there seemed thicker, as if resisting the heat. He pressed his hand to the wall and felt a tremor under the plaster. The vibration stopped as soon as he withdrew. That same night, Mara found small footprints on the landing outside the children's room. They were made of ash. She cleaned them without telling Ethan, brushing the gray away until her hands were smudged black. The next morning, the smell of smoke returned stronger. It came from the vents, the furniture, their clothes. The house absorbed it. Ethan spent the day tracing the heating lines, convinced something was burning inside the ducts. He found nothing. The walls, however, had begun to bulge faintly along that same corner of the living room, a swelling that hadn't been there before. When he tapped the wood, it sounded hollow. He planned to open it up when he had the right tools. The following evening, Mara woke to find Lucas standing at the foot of their bed, unmoving, his skin pale under the faint light from the hall. He would not answer her questions, but his hands were gray again, his fingernails packed with soot. She washed him in silence, and in the morning he remembered nothing. Ethan tore at the wall that day. The plaster crumbled quickly, the wood behind it damp and warped. Beneath the boards, he uncovered a space about 4 feet wide. Sealed tight with soot and char inside was what remained of another wall, brick, blackened but intact. The smell that escaped was deep and sour, something that hadn't touched air in years. He pried at the bricks until one came loose. Behind it lay a void, shallow but wide, and in that void were the bones of a person sitting upright, their spine twisted as if they had turned too late. The skull had fractured. Beneath one arm rested a burned wooden cross, and beside it, the remains of wire looped around brittle wrists. He sealed it again without speaking. That night, the temperature dropped further. Every light dimmed to a dull amber. The walls breathed with faint motion. The smell of burnt flesh settled through the house, and the hum returned, low, steady, pulsing through the floors like a distant heartbeat. Mara knew something had changed without asking. The children could not sleep. The bed-sheets grew damp with a moisture that came from nowhere. The windows fogged on the inside. When Ethan touched the glass, frost spread outward in fine, branching lines. He burned incense, lit candles, anything to break the odor. It did nothing. The hum deepened. The shadows grew thicker. Objects shifted overnight, tools, chairs, small things that should not have moved. Lucas grew pale and quiet, refusing to enter the living room. Emily began to draw pictures of the corner in black crayon, covering page after page with the same dark shape. On the 23rd night, Mara awoke to a sound below the floor. It was not movement but rhythm, a slow scraping that rose through the beams like someone dragging a chain against wood. Ethan followed it to the cellar, where dust poured from the ceiling in thin trails. The sound came from above him, through the living room floor. He struck the boards with a hammer until one split, revealing the cavity below where the old fire had started. Inside, the remains of insulation were soaked with black residue, and at the very center, the wood pulsed with faint warmth. When he reached in, the surface gave way like soft soil. Beneath his fingers lay something dry and fibrous, fabric, hair, and beneath that, bone. The hum stopped. The silence that followed was complete, like the pause between two heartbeats. Then the floorboards flexed once, releasing a faint rush of air that smelled of ashes and something sour. He brought the remains outside before dawn, carrying them in a bucket, moving with slow precision as if any sudden motion might wake the house again. He built a small fire in the field beyond the yard and burned what he had found. The smoke rose straight upward, black against the early gray sky. When the sun came, the coldness lifted. The smell thinned. The air in the house felt ordinary for the first time since they arrived. Mara cleaned the rooms with vinegar and water until her hands were raw. Lucas and Emily slept through the day without stirring. For 2 days, the quiet held.